We are entering into the strange world of prepositions. And I'm actually liking the response of those, some of you tuned in to actually want to do Hebrew, in the process are saying, gee, I needed to brush up on those English concepts. So we'll tackle a little bit of both. This is helpful as well because I know we have listeners all over the world, and some of them may listen to a program, whether it's myself or Dr. Scott, with terminology that is commonplace to us. We use the word preposition, and we use prepositions, and we use nouns and pronouns, but to those who are not accustomed and familiar with our language, being that maybe English is a second or third language for them, this will also be helpful. So, just a little background here. The word preposition is from the Latin pre, prefix pre, which is to mean before, and ponere, to put. So preposition is usually placed before its object. So you know the word preposition is to place or to put before. Now, prepositions are small words, but I'm curious to know if you would be as shocked as I think I'm shocked to know. I put a lower amount of words on here, claiming that there's over 100 prepositions, but I think I went back to count, and I think I might have counted 150. There's a whole lot of them. Lots. So, we're only referring to English now for the moment to set the stage for what will happen with Hebrew. Preposition is a word governing, usually in front of a noun or a pronoun. It's expressing relation to another word. What you'll have is a preposition, and you'll either have a noun or a pronoun, but you will not have a verb. So, if you have the need to have an action word, it will have to be a verbal noun, like something ending in ing, but it will not be a verb. These are English rules. I didn't make them up, all right? And I've given you a short list. I didn't put all 100, a short list of some few prepositions that are somewhat common. There's also complex or compound prepositions where we take two prepositions. For example, and I'll read you a few in case there's some people out there that say, well, I don't even know what I know what it is, but I don't know what it is. Above, across, after, against, along, among, around, as, at, before, behind, below, beneath, beside, between, beyond, but, by. All right, you get the point. It's these small words that either, for us, will communicate a relationship of time, they will communicate a relationship of place or location. So it's interesting. We can put two of these words together. They become a compound or complex prepositions. I also gave you a short list. None of this is exhaustive. A short list of words that look like verb participles but are actually prepositions. Words like concerning, considering. Kind of interesting. I probably would have read by and said, considering, considered, considering. I'd have to go through that and see, could I make that into a verb? But actually, that's how you will determine the placement of if it is really a preposition, is the placement, where it occurs. Because something that looks like a preposition may occur somewhere else and actually will be acting as something else, but only these that occur right before the noun or the pronoun in English. And I think that's extremely important. We have developed, and I shouldn't say we because English is not a first language for me, so I get off easy on this. But you all, see, like that? Y'all have developed some interesting speech habits that have become the norm but if one would stop and ask, is this the correct form? No. All right. So I've given you some examples of preposition of time and how they're used. And it's just brief. I could have gone on and done all of them, but I didn't. I spared you. So for example, in prepositions of time, with words like on, in, at, since, or for. So on Monday night, we study Hebrew. There's a use right there, telling you about something related to on Monday. Monday being a proper noun, person, place, or thing. Preposition of time, in 2012, or at 7 p.m. So we can use these as indicators in relationship to time. We can also use them regarding place, location, or direction, and I've given some examples. With that as a background, and that's all I'm going to do, you print these out and you can mull over them and test your English skills. With that as a background, Hebrew prepositions function just like English. Phew, thank goodness. There are 3 types of prepositions, 3 different types of prepositions, and this is kind of an easier lesson, I believe, than some of the other lessons we've done. So I've tried to write them briefly here for you on my tablet. So the 3 types are independent prepositions, Maquef prepositions, and inseparable. Now, previously I made a statement and said that prepositions in Hebrew are attached because that's the bulk of how you're going to see them. The bulk of prepositions that we are going to deal with will be attached to the word. But I need to tell you about these others, so we'll look at them briefly. Independent, I would say it's safe to say that should be axiomatic, that it stands independent, it stands alone as a preposition. For example, we have here al, which is upon, the word upon, im, which is with. If we were to stick this word im, for example, to, we've seen this many times, Emmanuel, when I taught with us God, that's how the word starts. So a lot of times we encounter parts of these words and other words, and it's interesting, you'll find that the Hebrew vocabulary is rather small. So once you get familiar with a few of these, you'll begin to see them over and over again, and you'll say, oh yeah, that's an independent preposition, that stands by itself, telling me something about what follows. Noun. All right. And I've given you some examples here. We have the word min, from. These are all listed on my sheet, plus a few more. Ad, which is until. So, independent. It stands alone. These will not be attached to something else. They're in a part of a sentence. You'll see them, and they won't be attached to anything. They're independent. Maquef. So I said 3. I'll do it like this. 1. Maquef. 2. It's called Maquef. We covered this in another lesson. You'll see how things overlap slightly. They're called Maquef prepositions. Why? Because they are connected by a Maquef. That is the Maquef right there, that line. And if you'll notice, if I was doing this properly and it was to look proper, the line, the Maquef, would align up as a horizontal line that occurs right at the top of where the letters, of where each letter begins. So it's like a hyphen on steroids at the top of the page where the letters begin, not in the middle. Having said that, you can see the same preposition here, all right? The same preposition as up here in the independence, al, but now it's attached by this little dash. And so we have here, this would be translated as, for example, upon, Ooh, look what we have here. We have a definite article. Upon the ark. This would be translated like that, upon the ark. So Maquef is the second type. And then the third type is inseparable. And that category will become extremely important as we study and go back into our handouts in Psalm 91. There are three categories, three different letters for inseparable. Once you know these, there's not going to be some new ones down the road. That's it. The bus stops here. This is the terminus for inseparable prepositions. So we have the be with the shiva, and that is, by the way, the sign where you will most likely encounter and recognize an inseparable preposition. Even though I'm showing you them isolated, they will be connected to a word. That's why they're called inseparable. And I'm making this for people who have blurry vision. I'm sorry. All right, so we see the shoe underneath. And each one of these, so you have three, will attach themselves to other words, and they do not detach. That's why they're called inseparable. So the bet down here, the B, let's use some blue here. This one letter as a preposition is used over 15,000 times, just a little numbers here. Don't quote me on that, it may be more. Over 15,000 times in the Hebrew Bible, Hebrew scriptures. This bet with the shiva underneath in, by, against, all right? So when it attaches itself to a noun, person, place, or thing, it will not be detached. It sticks itself to and attaches to the noun. And the interesting thing about Hebrew is this one letter attached to another word will make the word, for example, if we were going to use our word out of Psalm 91, which I'll get to in a minute, where we had the King James translating a stone. And we kind of, I said I want to wait to get to this point, which I'm going to show you tonight what happens. But it's interesting, this single letter will attach itself to the rest of the word and become one. So now the preposition is attached. It tells you against, in, or by, plus the noun, if you're translating. The lamed, with the shiva underneath, as an inseparable preposition. 2 or 4, please, these are not exhaustive. I'm just giving you ideas because it's so broad. I'm going to show you in the lexicon how broad it is, and you're going to say, oh boy. This guy over here occurs over 20,000 times. Very popular. And kaf, or he'll put this with the shoe underneath, like or as a preposition, and just a paltry 3,000 times perhaps. Seems not that popular, unfair. All right. So that gives you an idea of prepositions and why this becomes important. Again, it always comes down to this. I tried to show you this just briefly in passing yesterday out of Genesis 22, the difference between Abraham saying a lamb and the lamb. Because if you're a prophecy person, you want to read that and see very clearly that that declaration of a specific word not only carries the weight of Abraham's faith that God would provide, it also carries a very strong word of prophecy with it. For those people that are into types and prophecy, the definite article it clears things up. There's nothing ambiguous. It's not just like, well, there'll be something around here that God will cough up. No, the lamb, the sacrifice. So now, let's put all this together. Let's go to a new page here. And, all right. So, a few rules, and you're going to love this, because this is where we get to see how things work. It's kind of like the mechanics. A few rules for inseparable prepositions. When you are attaching a preposition to a noun that begins with a consonant, we went through this. If you have to go back and consult your alphabet, everything in the Hebrew alphabet that you saw in your bold letters is a consonant, pretty much. So, except for the gutturals, but they're still considered consonants. So, anything that begins as a consonant, any noun beginning with a consonant that has an inseparable preposition attached will appear exactly the way I wrote them earlier. So, let's start off by writing these again. We'll put the B, and we'll put, let's put this over here, too. They'll appear just like that if they're appearing with a word that starts with a consonant. So I have a couple of examples here. For example, if we were writing out the word king, melek or milek, put the accent there, and we were wanting to say two or four, and we see there's no definite article, so we could say it's a king, because there's no article here, a king. So we might, if we were attaching this preposition, which has now become inseparable, it's attached to the word, we might translate this to or for a king. And now suddenly you begin to start seeing these words that were just kind of blocks and fragments now beginning to take shape. So when we attach a preposition to a noun, such as this, it now is being taken as a whole. So when I say inseparable, it's now one. And sometime later we'll begin to talk about how we'll be able to make a parallel between the Greek that we've learned, our grammar box, and using some of these prepositions over time, you'll see how we'll make a comparison. But right now I want to keep it simple. So we're just learning about the rules of operation. How do these inseparable prepositions work? When an inseparable preposition appears before a reduced vowel, you remember what the reduced vowels look like? We made a whole list of them. For example, sometimes the beginning will look like this, or sometimes a reduced vowel. Do you remember that in the lesson? So there was always a shua, and then these were the reduced ones. All right? So they weren't the full, they were reduced. You'd have to consult back to your vowel chart to identify. But if an inseparable preposition appears before a reduced or hatep vowel, and I'm going to give you an example here so you'll see. I love the way the Hebrew does this. Let's take the word emet, or emet. And here you can see all of these 5 dots make up the reduced or hatep vowel. And let's just say now I want to add the preposition, the bet preposition. I want to add it. So let's do this word, emet, which is usually translated truth. And I want to add a preposition, which would normally look like this. What's going to happen when I add this preposition, be, bet, to the word truth, emet? It's going to look like this. This letter, my first preposition here, is going to take on the vowel, the short vowel of the next letter. You see that? So instead of it being a shiva that begins at the front, because of what's going on under here, the preposition takes on the short vowel portion. So it would look, forgive now the scribbles that I've created, it would look like this now. So your word now, your preposition has morphed itself, essentially, and taken on this portion, the short vowel, to be able to stay together. Think of it this way. If the preposition doesn't change its way, it can't stay. So it has to change underneath, and it takes on, it morphs what's over here. We'll do another one, see how this works. But this then would be translated. So we had truth, and this could be in or with. So we might translate this in truth or with truth. All right? And now this word, we've just taken a preposition, be, and added it to emet, so it becomes beemet, and it is now one word. This preposition is stuck. It is now part of that word. Okay? Let's do another one so you can see the difference. I gave you an example using this hatep vowel under here. We'll do another one. Let's go back to black as the color. Let's use the word, and same from the handout here, so you'll see it on the handout. I've done the same thing. We will use the word for men or man, but in this case it's plural, men. And I want you to see short hatep right here. So inoshim for men, inosh, man, inoshim, men. And if we wanted to add the preposition up here, we might bring this down here. And the first thing we see is in order for the preposition to attach itself, the shiva has to be modified underneath. What will it do? It will take on this in its full form. So I'm just going to erase under here now, magically. And that's the vowel that you will see under your preposition. It's kind of easy. Once you get the hang of this, you'll see it's just like some morphing has to occur for the preposition to be able to stay and hang out and become inseparable. Otherwise, it can't stay, all right? So we will have examples of this, and a lot of these examples do occur in Psalm 91. So you're going to have an assignment afterwards, and I think you're going to find this really interesting to comb through all of your handouts through Psalm 91 and find where there are inseparable. This will just get you familiar. Where are the inseparable ones, the inseparable prepositions? Are there any Maquefs in here? And are there any that are standing independently? And don't confuse the independent ones with the Maquef, because in order for it to be a Maquef preposition, it must have that dash, that horizontal dash up top. If it has no dash, it's independent. Okay, let's take a new page. So, 2 or 3 more rules and I'm done. You remember we did a lesson where I explained that 2 shuas cannot begin a sentence. So I'm going to invent something here. Hypothetically, if this is our preposition and the letter beginning our word begins with a shiva as well, and we want to attach this preposition, L, to or for, to our word, and let me just put X's because this is a pretend word. What will happen here is 2 shuas cannot start a word side by side. So what will happen is our preposition is just going to drop down to what's called a hirek, 1 dot. The next letter or consonant will maintain its shua and your word progresses. It's just, these are simple, basic rules. When you go over them after a while, it'll be like, wow, you know what? This is a lot easier than memorizing over 100 or 150 English prepositions. I have a fine way of putting things, don't I? All right. Now, here's the one I've been waiting to get to. This was like my excitement. You remember, I just used this example with you in, I think it's in verse 12, Psalm 91, verse 12. And we had that wonderful problem of how the King James translated. I've so blocked it out of my mind. It's the wonder of when you start erasing some of the things that have been stuck in there. All right, King James says, lest thou dash thy foot against a stone. And they used a stone indefinite article in the English, a indefinite. This was what thrilled my soul here. Because right in our psalm, we have a good example of what happens when you have a noun. When you have a noun and a definite article, and now we want to put a preposition. We want to attach this preposition to our noun, or any preposition at this point, just to make the point. What happens, remember I said to you, definite article, we did the definite article, and I said everything stays the same. The definite article will always stay the same unless this. This is the only time where there's an anomaly. If you have a noun, which is definite, having the definite article before it, and now all of a sudden we want to attach a preposition, something amazing is going to happen. So let's take, I'm going to give you an example first, and then we'll do our Psalm 91 to show you the point. So let's use this standard, easy one. Let's use the king, because it's the one that everybody seems to retain the best. So, ha-melech, the king, all right? And hypothetically, if we were to add this preposition, something must happen in adding the preposition. You'll find suddenly, the hey, our definite article, the hey, I shouldn't have circled that like that. Just the letter itself is going to disappear. All right. So, what disappears? The letter. Not the vowel immediately, and not the dagesh. I should have done that in another color too. So this doesn't disappear, and neither does that. Hey, that looks like a drawing. All right. So we're going to combine it and put it all together, and this is what it's going to look like now. That line that was previously under the hey is now sitting under our preposition, and we have the word now being put together with a preposition and a definite article, like the king. So what happens, our definite article must drop out, and what remains will be the vowel that was underneath it and the dagesh in the letter, which is carried forward here in our example. So if you begin to try and translate things, this is an important rule you must know, that the hey, the definite article, in appearance, the letter dropped away because the preposition came to attach itself to the word. So, we get into some challenging issues with this vowel that resides under what is now the preposition, because there are exceptions to what happens to the vowel points. But this was my main drive with this word we looked at in verse 12. Because in verse 12 we were dealing with, we have bet, we've got this vowel underneath, and then we've got something interesting, which I think you'll see for yourself, even. So, this by itself, if this word, even or even, stood by itself, we would have had a or an, being that it would have been seen as indefinite. But now we have a preposition, and if you remember our grammar rule, which was sometimes when a weak letter starts a word, something has to happen to the vowel underneath to strengthen or fortify. So what we're looking at is indeed a preposition and the sign of a definite article standing right there. So you can understand my excitement, because when I read this and did the translation in our Psalm 91 verse 12, it began to bother me. In fact, I think for many weeks I was flustered at the fact that, why did they do that? Why did they do that? And as I began to really truly translate every dimension and the structure of the way the sentences are put together, it dawned on me that that is not an accurate translation. Not only is it not an accurate translation, it misses the meaning of what the speaker or writer was intending to convey, which is not at all, by the way, an indefinite a stone, and there's something specific being told to us. Now, I'm going to tell you this so you can be clear. When we have enough substantial grammar that we have digested, we'll go back and pick apart. There are at least 2 verses I want us to pick apart big time, because they have some, I feel, some very poorly translated structures in the King James, and they do change the meaning. But looking at this, I think it's like, wow, we actually have an example of what I'm teaching tonight right in front of us, and it's one of the more complex ones. As I told you, I was up at San Quentin, and I have a gentleman, an elderly couple, that they've gone in there for years. And he teaches Hebrew at some college or university up there in the Bay Area. And I remember coming in, I had my piece of paper folded, and I had a morphologically tagged paper, but I covered up what I had put there. I covered it up so he couldn't see what I put. And I said, tell me what part of speech that is. And he sat there and he said, well, that's a preposition, and that's a definite article, and that's a noun. And I just looked at him and I said, thank you very much. And of course, when I told him, he immediately went into his Bible and changed. He said, I didn't see that. Immediately went in and he scratched out in his Bible, scratched out the article. Then he and I had a great conversation about what ramifications this had on the understanding of this verse. So amazing that these type of lessons eventually will let us go in to do some of those studies together, which is extremely exciting. It's just a great thing to be able to see for yourself. If you're like me, and I am Thomas-like, I've got to see it. All right. So let me give you the last page of this. Let's go to a new page because I'm doing a lot of scribbling tonight. All right. Last page, and this is a noteworthy part of understanding some of these prepositions. There's one preposition that's, it's a whole lot of fun. If you get into translation, you will learn to either love this word or hate it. Min, just as simple as that. You've got the M and the dot underneath, hirek and nun. But this little preposition is very noteworthy because it can do a lot of things. It's very versatile. It can annoy you. No, actually it can be used for comparatives. Usually when you're trying to say it's greater than something, better than something, this preposition gets used an awful lot. As a superlative, we have the ability in English to lay on layers of things, but we would use this very same preposition to accomplish that. And as a partitive, to convey a part or portion of something. None of this is needful right now, but if and when you get into, I envision some of you with kind of like archaeologists, with all the gear on, going in there to dig with all your books, you're going to want to know this. And so just for fun now, just because I think this is like tossing it all together to where at the end you say, okay, I've seen it all. This preposition, it's one of my favorite exercises here. This preposition plus, and we're going to use the word panim. Panim is a great word. Pani, singular would be face, or what is normally always used in the plural, faces. And why is this so interesting? Because this word faces is usually used to describe before someone, in the presence of. It's more of a poetic word. So if you put this min plus panim together, we have a morphing that occurs. The nun is going to drop off, giving you this look. It will look like this. Pani. And yes, I'm writing backwards. All right, so interesting that panim plus min will give you this word, which can be translated as a compound from the presence of, all right, or from before or away. Now you take this same word, and attach the lamed preposition. And you'll do the same thing. You'll attach it, and it's inseparable once it's attached, and it'll look similar to this. And each one will change the meaning just slightly. So this one will mean to face. We were saying to face forward, from before. And then if you want to put it all together and see how many compounds you can get, and this is why I did this, to show you, you can just keep adding. If you were to attach min plus, it's like how many people can you fit in a Volkswagen? Min plus lamed plus panim. And this is what you get. You get a lot of confusion. You get this word, and it's very interesting that you can put these things together, and they still maintain their integrity, and people can still read what it says. This might be translated out from the presence of. If you were saying out of the presence of someone, out of somebody's presence, that is not legible. So we have compounds that, as you may be parsing through your lessons, you may uncover. And that's what I would like you to do, is I would like you to go into your, if you have all your handouts, and leisurely, just as an exercise, just kind of go through and see, do you see? I've labeled them, but try not to look at what I've tagged for you. Try not to look at those, and see if you can spot the prepositions. See if you can see, for example, the first one in Psalm 91 in verse 1, the second word, beseter. There you have a preposition. And interesting, the rules I just explained to you are clearly applied. See if I can would help if I use the right color here. So, let's see if the rules are rightly applied. We have the preposition occurring, and then here's your consonant. Just a regular, normal, there's nothing abnormal about it, so it doesn't change. It maintains its integrity. Now, I'm sure as I look down here, because I'm not going to read upside down, we're going to find many more of these. And I'm trying to see, I see a Maquef in here, but it's not what you think it is. But let's look together, because there's some things that are tricky. You're going to say, now I'm starting to get the parts of speech. There's one good one here that I really like. Unfortunately, it's not independent. It does have a Maquef. But if you look in verse 4, I'll hold this up for the folks at home who may not have some of these, and they might say, how do I get that? because this is the whole Psalm 91 we did together. You can get these on the internet, but I want you to look at this. Right here, we have a conjunction. Right here, this would be verse 4. But this word occurring right here is under or beneath, and there's a Maquef right there, joining it to the next word. But this is the truest form of, if there wasn't a Maquef, of a preposition, giving you the concept of place, underneath or beneath, right there. So there's plenty of these to go through, and it's really, as I said, it's a good exercise. You go through. I see in verse 3, there's a mem, which tells you that, I even translated right there for you. I say preposition from. Look right there, and you'll see, I even circled it on this particular handout. You have a mem that occurs, and we know that there is no singular mem by itself, so it had to have been a min that attached itself, which tells you that this word is from. It's a preposition meaning from. So as you keep chiseling away, you're going to start seeing this is not as strange as I thought it might be, and I'm starting to get the hang of this. And you begin to read over these. I'm looking through, I'm on verse 5 and verse 6, and I'm seeing lots of goodies in here. Yeah. So, verse 6, there's a 1, 2, 3. There's 3 right there, 3 prepositions right there. In verse 7, don't look at the notes. Don't look at those tags. Just try and identify them yourself at first blush as you go through. But this is how you will get familiar with the language, how it works. And we just did some, I'll use my own word. It's not a good Hebrew word. We just did some morphing tonight to show you what happens when a preposition saddles up to a definite article that's already attached to a noun, and there's some morphing process that occurs where the definite article, the letter itself, the hey drops out, but the vowel underneath and the dagish stay. There are different rules that apply, but after a time you say, wait a minute, in fact, maybe these may be simpler and easier to learn than some of the English grammar rules.